We'd learned our lesson after Paul's Boutique. We now wanted a super cheap space that we could take over indefinitely. Leave our shit there. Try any crazy idea we had, with the room to fail, and without the running meter, pressure, and cost of a big LA studio. We looked at some places in downtown LA, but at the time, DTLA still had too much of a Night of the Living Dead vibe. This was at the height of the crack epidemic. Then, a musician friend told me about this no-name studio in Atwater Village where he just worked. The owner was a musician who worked out of the studio, but things seemed really slow, so maybe we could work something out with him. In 1990, Atwater was a sleepy little neighborhood just over the LA River from Silver Lake. It had a main shopping strip with a small-town USA vibe and not much else. The studio was in a building on that main strip, above a drugstore. The place didn't look like much from the outside, but inside, it was perfect. The main room was a big, open ballroom. I think it used to be some kind of Rotary Club or Lions Club or something, with a parquet floor and a high round ceiling. Tony Ripperetti ran it. Very nice guy. Had a minor hit in the early 80s as a member of the LA band Susad and the Next. Was now doing film scores out of the studio. Mostly cyborg and slasher type stuff. Another guy had a room there. Country Mike. He too had a couple of minor hits in his past. Seemed like he'd been through a lot. His room smelled of cheap weed and bad wine. Empty wine bottles on the floor. He had this routine of coming in and writing one song a night. He'd ride the bus over from Angelino Heights as a way to find inspiration in the faces and conversations of the other commuters. He'd come in, brew a big pot of coffee, and get to work. He may or may not have been slightly intoxicated by the end of the day, but he'd have a new song. We took the place immediately. Tony had his 2 rooms, Country Mike kept his, and we took the big ballroom. To make a separate control room, we decided to tear up and combine 2 adjoining closets. Then we need to build out that control room and get the main room right. And by get the main room right, I mean we had to build a skate ramp and install a basketball hoop in there. And also extend the stage a bit so we could leave all our instruments set up. It was crucial to have everything ready to go at all times, so whatever dumb idea one of us came up with, we could play and record it immediately. We lacked the discipline to sit on an idea while equipment got set up. We'd never remember it, so it was paramount that we could record pretty much anything right away. Pre-internet, finding used instruments and vintage studio gear was a real pain in the ass. You could go to music shops, but that entailed a day of listening to some guitar noodling, mullet-sporting owner hold forth on whatever topics struck his fancy until he decided whether or not to sell you the thing that he knew you really wanted. In LA, circa 1990, the gold mine for used gear was this weekly, small-sized newspaper called The Recycler. Basically, all it contained was pages and pages of classified ads. The key to getting anything good or underpriced was being the first person to call about something, so you had to buy The Recycler right when it came out every week. We outfitted our entire studio with gear we found via The Recycler. The timing was perfect for buying the type of vintage instruments we wanted. They were considered obsolete by pros and hadn't yet been adopted by collectors. Pros at that time wanted brand new keyboards that had clavinet and Wurlitzer and organ sounds all built in with digital technology, so they all wanted to get rid of their Hohner D6 clavinets or their Mini Moogs or their Rhodes 88s. You'd get that stuff ridiculously cheap. The weirdest part was when you'd go deep into the valley to pick up a piece of gear at a stranger's house. It would give you uncomfortable insight into their whole life story. Pretty much every purchase for us was a result of some other guy having to give up his dream. It definitely added a tinge of bittersweet to our otherwise good fortune. After a few months of work, we finally got our new studio up and running. There was an old sign on the roof that originally said Gelson Plumbing, but all that was left was an aging G, then a few spaces, and then Sun. So, we named the studio G-Sun. G-Sun with the parquet floor. Now, all we needed to do was make another record.